today we're going to be talking about some harsh truths that I've learned recently as a dad in life and business. And I'm going to have a special guest for some of it, the one and only Cami Hauser. And we're going to dive right in. What do you say, Cami? Yeah, that's beautiful. The first thing I want to talk about is push periods versus reflection periods. Unlike when mommy was pushing you out. Yeah, that's our Cami cameo. Cameo. In entrepreneurship, everyone likes to talk about the push, the grind. There's times for that, and there's also times for reflection and slowing down. Recently, over the last year, I've been doing a ton of pushing. And over the last month, I've transitioned to a phase of reflection, looking at how many things have changed in my life and how much pushing it's taken to get to this current point. 4 months ago, I had my daughter. A year ago, I didn't even have an executive team. I had no backbone of financial management for my company. I didn't have a self-managing sales team. And now I have all those things. I have an amazing executive team in the business, a self-managing sales team that is crushing it, and at least I feel I have almost full financial control over our current business. And that took a lot of pushing to get to that point. That took a lot of intensity and grinding and just ferocious levels of focus. When you get to the end of a push period, the body will tell you, hey, it's time to reflect. It's time to take a minute and breathe, right? It's not necessarily about slowing down. It's more about giving yourself a breath as you continue to go fast. But the hardest thing is knowing what the next version of you is. At any chapter in your life, the hardest thing is changing yourself. Whenever people say you've changed, I always look at that as a compliment. Whereas most people I went to high school with, they say, oh, you've changed, and maybe they mean it in a negative way. But I take that as oh, you're damn right I changed, because if I didn't change, then I would still be who I was 10 years ago, which was suffering. That's who I was 10 years ago. So I don't have a choice but to change. And with the size of goals that I've set for myself, I don't have a choice but to continually update my personality, update my characteristics, update my identity. When you go through a software update or upgrade, you can't use the computer typically when the software is installing, right? And that same thing has to happen for human beings. We all have to give ourselves moments to absorb, reflect, and become the next version of ourselves. So that's the first kind of harsh truth that I've learned is you can't just constantly push without reflection. Ray Dalio says it best, pain plus reflection is progress. If you just go through the pain and don't reflect, chances are you're gonna just keep grinding your gears. The second harsh truth that I learned, when things start working, don't break it. When you have the gene of taking tons of massive action, it's easy to look at things that aren't working and go and fix them, right? To take an area of your life that's not working, go in and fix it, right? And staying in that fixer mindset can provide a ton of good and a ton of progress. If there's an area of your life or business that's actually working, let it work. Step away from it. I noticed myself recently getting involved in a ton of things I just didn't need to get involved in, and it just was a huge waste of time. I should just let things ride, but it feels like I'm not needed anymore when a part of my business starts working. And that is a scary feeling because it's a challenge to my identity, a lot of which I wrap up in my business, unfortunately. So when something starts working, it's hard to step away from it because it's like stepping away from a part of my identity. But as Charlie Munger says, part of his success came from assiduity. What he meant by that is sitting on his ass for long periods of time and waiting for the right time to do something. He says it borders on the side of lethargy because he sits on his ass so much and reads and contemplates that when he's ready to do something, he's put so much critical thought and so much ass time into it. Chances are his decisions are going to be the right decisions. So sometimes it's an ass period for you. Harsh truth number 3, If Michael Jordan had time to play golf, then you and I have time to have an outlet. I have really hardwired myself that anything that is not directly related to my goals is a waste of time, a distraction. Recently, I have re-sparked a amazing love in my life, aside from my wife, my second love, I'll call it, and that's dirt biking. Actually, I should just go show you the dirt bike right now. Here is the 17X machine. You can tell I put a lot of thought to the graphics on it. Sponsored by Duct Tape International. I actually love having duct tape graphics because it makes people underestimate me. It's so funny when I'm like on the starting gate, people look over at me like, this guy. Over here, we got all of my stuff for this weekend. Taking my good old pickup truck right there. And we'll be gone for 3 full days. If I get high enough finish, then I'll qualify for nationals, and only 42 racers in the world every year in each class qualify for what's called the Loretta Lynn's Amateur National, which is really like the biggest national championship. This is an example of an outlet that I am obsessed about. So have an outlet that simplifies things. Have an outlet that is separate from your work, that you still can apply yourself to. Attempting to qualify for the amateur national championships on my dirt bike, that's not an easy thing to do. I have a ton of other shit going on, and that's precisely why I should be doing this. At the pace that I've been running at for the last 6 years straight growing my business, I've allowed myself really one time period in those 6 years to enjoy this pastime of mine, racing dirt bikes. I'm an extreme sports person. That's just who I am. I like taking risks and doing big death-defying stuff. I probably wouldn't be a good golf player, because that is like the opposite of risk-taking. Sign me up for mountain biking, snowboarding down multi-mile long vertical cliffs. I mean, it's just what I grew up doing. Having a pastime that requires so much of you, it definitely brings a different lens of focus to your company, because when you have something else that takes up your mind, it forces you to think about higher value things in your main thing. Example, I have 16 available hours to focus on my business in a day, versus I only have 8 hours in a day to focus on my business, and half of that time is spent doing something else. That time limit of cutting the available time in half forces me to focus on higher value things because I have less time than I otherwise would. And then also, Jay Abraham says, if you take things from another discipline and apply it to your discipline, that's where breakthroughs come from. So if I take something from the construction industry and apply it to law firms, as an example, that synergy could create a breakthrough innovation, a new way of thinking through things. If I pursue something that's in a completely different domain than my core thing, chances are I'm going to bring a perspective from that new thing that I'm doing into my existing thing. The next big insight is that profits are a choice and require discipline. My first 6 years in business, I made excuses that I was reinvesting. What I realized is that that was an excuse for a lack of discipline. I was basically making excuses that I didn't have a clear financial plan that I was adhering to and tying myself to. This applies to how much money you make personally. This applies to how much your company profits. It applies to so many different things. But for me, I was tolerating my company basically profiting nothing for 6 years because of excuses. The opposite of that is learning that profits are a choice and require discipline. So once I put a crystal clear financial plan in place for my business and held my team accountable to reaching the drivers within that financial model, everything changed. I realized that I could have basically profited all the years that I made excuses about not profiting. And all it took was a little bit of discipline and really just the choice. Insight number 5 is the things that I should personally be focused on always change. I think that's probably one of the toughest things about the role as a CEO is There is no rule book on where you should spend your time and focus your energy. It's constantly changing. It evolves with what stage of business you're at, and it evolves with your skills and your interests as they inevitably develop over time. When you're a smaller company, like, your focus has to primarily be on sales, meaning, selling your product or service. And that is a very one-off transactional activity. You put 1 unit of effort in, and then you get 1 unit of return. Focus changes at every stage, and compare that to now where, like, I'm basically making decisions that impact over 100 people. There's a lot more risk in the level of decisions that I'm making. For example, let's say I change one policy that affects 100 people and all of our hundreds of clients, right? Compare that decision that affects hundreds of people to a decision to close a deal when I was my only employee. The magnitude of these decisions are dramatically different, right? So as you grow in a company, you have to spend more time on things that don't have an immediate impact as you grow. And as you're in a smaller phase, you focus more on doing immediate things in the here and now. And being okay with that shifting has been a huge lesson for me, rather than trying to resist it or trying to go back to the way I did things in the past. Just riding the wave, just understanding that this is a part of the job I signed up for. So the next one is really a piggyback off of this. The 3 areas I learned of where I should be focused. A lot of thought that went into simplifying this, but number 1 is execution. Number 2 is planning, and number 3 is external, which is basically external relationships. Execution is basically me doing something. Execution would be me actually completing a project myself, right? Planning is creating the focus of the organization and deciding what are the right projects to focus on, right? Rather than me doing the projects. And then external, or external relationships, is me investing in people who are way beyond me, people who can open up doors for myself, my company, my future. And by staying balanced between these 3 categories, right now I'm at about a 40-40-20 split. So 40% focused on execution, 40% focused on planning, and 20% focused on external. But when I started my company, I was focused 100% on execution, almost 0 on planning, and 0 on external, because I was just so in the moment executing. If you ever become a leader or owner of like a multi-billion-dollar company, chances are you're going to spend 50% of your time in planning and 50% in external and 0% in execution. Because when you have 100,000 employees, if there's a problem if you're the one executing something, unless it's one of the highest value things in the entire company that requires your focus. And that discipline is a really tough muscle to adapt with and learn how to use in terms of where to spend your time. Which leads me to the next one, which is to always invest in relationships. No matter how busy you get, always find time to invest in relationships, even if they don't have an immediate return tied to them. One of the biggest mistakes I've made is abandoning relationships when fear gets high. I tend to have a lot of fear about my business not succeeding, just from my past and my family going bankrupt in 2008. I have a lot of scar tissue there, and when I get scared of things not working, I tend to dive into those things, and out of fear, I go and creative problem solve those things, but then I don't invest in the areas that are outside of that, like relationships and important people in my life. Believe me, it has a ton of great results on the outside, but on the inside, it leaves you feeling pretty lonely, and that's not usually sustainable, loneliness, and I'd rather stay sustainable. So that's another big, harsh truth lesson, is always invest in relationships no matter how busy you are. And the last big insight, how to improve your product or service. This has been a skill that I've needed to learn as a CEO. That's been a difficult one because it's so cross-functional. if you look at a breakdown of our company's, I think 120 employees, the majority of our team members are actually focused on delivering world-class service to our clients, right? And to steer a ship of, call it 80 people who are focused on that, it takes a little bit of time. And it's difficult to identify what to improve, how to improve it. And the hardest thing I had to learn is patience, right? If you're solving something important, like, improving the quality of your product or service, it takes time. And you have to be okay with it taking time, because nothing good comes immediately. So we went through this huge, deep analysis on all of our products and services and found out what was crushing it and what we needed to, quite frankly, rethink from the ground up. And that process probably took about 3 months from start to finish. And in those 3 months, I really was in that planning mode for 3 full months. So I had to discipline myself to not step in and not execute things that could have been the wrong things. And because I waited for that analysis to be complete for 3 months, I then made better decisions at the end of that 3-month investment of time. So the big lesson is really around patience. When you are in business, if you have a bad product, eventually it's going to catch up with you. Part of the reason that our company has grown so fast year over year for 6 years in a row is because our product actually produces an outcome for people. And we have real human beings doing it. It's not some ClickFunnels millionaire company, sign up and get free coaching for $50,000 and that's it. We'll just coach you and no deliverables. Like, no, we have hard deliverables we have to deliver to people. We have a virtual assistant company. We have fractional CFO services. We have bookkeeping. We have our full service digital marketing agency. We have our coaching business. We have our fractional COO business, which is new. And my job as CEO is to make sure that what we promise is what we're actually delivering. But more importantly, that what we're delivering is a blue ocean product. It's something that nobody else can offer. A red ocean, it's filled with sharks, there's blood in the water, there's a ton of competitors. The blue ocean, maybe we're the only competitor in the space. Controlling the quality of your product is like, I can't think of anything more important. If you look at the Forbes billionaire list, you're probably not gonna find any person who just focused on selling and marketing their product. You're probably gonna find 99% of the billionaires focused on creating a world-class product and then promoting that world-class product. That skill is probably one of the most important lessons I've learned recently, is how to control product improvement and product change. So those are some of the harsh truths that I have recently learned. Some of them are life, some of them are business. So I hope you enjoyed, and maybe you can learn something about your own life through my own trials and tribulations. Leave a comment if you had a big takeaway, and I'll see you in the next video.